There's a natural kind of juxtaposition to today. That's why we call it Good Friday. There's a quote back when Pearl Harbor got bombed. Winston Churchill said later on that night he slept the sleep of the saved. It's an interesting idea. What he was trying to communicate was on that day, one of the darkest days of the war, on that day he slept securely because he knew what looked like defeat was really victory. So on the cross, one of the coolest moments, Jesus has 7 sayings. And scholars talk about how all 7 sayings are found in the context of Psalm 22. And it builds up to this idea where Jesus says, you've heard the phrase, my God, why have you forsaken me? And so many times people wrestle with what is Jesus saying there? Is he separated from the Father? Can God not look at him anymore? Did God turn his back on Jesus? Is it just a cry of abandonment? And what I think is really happening there is Jesus is actually proclaiming victory in the midst of what looks like despair. So in the Old Testament, before we came around, there wasn't chapters and verses. And so if you were a Jewish person who'd memorized it, you'd reference the Psalms by the first line. Psalm 22 starts with, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it's really fascinating because throughout that psalm, you see a unique depiction of crucifixion before crucifixion even existed, about 1,000 years before it came on the scene. When David writes, he talks about, hands and feet pierced. He talks about thirsting. He talks about the mother and son relationship. Jesus quotes all of these things. And then when it gets to, my God, why have you forsaken me? What he's not doing is crying abandonment. What Jesus is doing is reciting a 1,000-year-old song that ends with the victory, not the defeat of God. This is how I'm going to read it for you. This is how Psalm 22 ends. It ends by saying, all the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before him. They'll proclaim his righteousness to a people yet unborn. He has done it. And that phrase, he has done it, in Hebrew is one word, and it means, get this, it is finished. What did Jesus say at the end of the cross before he bowed his head and gave his spirit back to God? He said, it is finished. What Jesus is doing in that moment that looked like defeat is proclaiming victory. What he's not doing is questioning God. He's fulfilling God's plan that was in motion long before you and I came along or the Romans came along. It's not a moment of despair or doubt. It's a moment of victory. And I love that. That's why it's called Good Friday. Churchill went to bed that day and he says, today I sleep the sleep of the saved. And on Good Friday, so can we. Knowing that on a dark moment where a lot of suffering happened, that's where God did his work to finally defeat that which tries to defeat us.